Good afternoon, Emily.
Hi there, Michael.
My name is Michael Scholes. I am from a company called the Laboratory of Flowers. I'm the owner and formulator. And today I'm talking to Emily Carpenter from AromaTrust. And Emily is behind the Aroma Summit by AromaTrust. Good day to you. It's so great to be in this position so I can find out more about you. And so your listeners will know more about you when they come to look at the summit.
Awesome. Thanks. It's fun to be on this side of the screen. Usually we're sitting where you are, so it's a little different today.
I mean, we talked a little bit, Emily, and you just have a fascinating story. Like everybody has a fascinating story, but
Everyone
your story needs to be told. But the first question I have for you is, who is Emily Carpenter?
It takes a whole lifetime to figure that out. I'm still working on that.
What do you stand for in terms of where you are now in this? Because of course you've had a life before this life, and now you're in the aromatherapy world, which is where I am. What do you stand for? I mean, what is your creed, so to speak? What drives you to do what you do?
Oh, that's a great question, and I actually have an answer for that. So now that you've worded it that way, the Aroma Summit by AromaTrust, and AromaTrust is about aromatherapy. But underlying all of that for me is my mission is to help people to wake up and stay awake, and to be aware and stay aware in their lives, and to really be connected with themselves. That's been my mission the last few years. And so AromaTrust is a vehicle for that. So, I figure if I start with aromatherapists, people who are healers, that if they can have that experience in their lives, then they can pass that on to others. And so that's really my underlying mission through everything that I do.
Fascinating. When I think about waking up, I mean, maybe we speak the same language, but are you saying that waking up obviously doesn't mean that you're asleep? It means that there is an aspect of you that is asleep and not aware of all the senses, so to speak. And therefore, when you reignite those senses, then you come more into the world that we're talking about, the aromatic world. Would you agree with that?
Somewhat. So when I say awake and aware, I mean, a lot of my life, I felt like I was sleepwalking. I didn't even realize it. I was just getting up every day, doing the things I needed to do, and then going to bed at night and waking up and doing the same things all over again without a lot of awareness of why I was doing those things anymore or what I was doing them for. And so one day you wake up and you think, how did I get here? And then you have to really figure that out and really answer that question. And then also, where do I want to be? Is this where I want to be? And so, I made a lot of life decisions that changed the course of my life just by asking those questions and then really seeing if this is where I want to be. It's how I started my aromatherapy journey. It's how my marriage ended. It's how a lot of things happened in my life, was just asking those questions of, is this where I want to be? And, is where I was before, like the decision I made years ago still apply to me right now? And then getting those cycles quicker and quicker, rather than waiting decades to ask that question, asking it every, once a year. I have intentional time to think about what I want, but then also every month, every week, really having, and every day asking those questions. Is this how I want my life to be today? So I want people to really be aware of their life, intentional with how they're crafting their life, rather than just having things happen, and then not really be conscious in their own lives. Just going to the grocery store, sometimes someone with their shopping cart, they're not paying attention, just kind of standing in the way. I think it was during COVID where I really saw that, where people were so disconnected and they were just walking through their lives. And I go to the grocery store and I felt like I was surrounded by zombies. I felt like I was in the zombie apocalypse. We were so disconnected and disjointed and unaware of other people and our surroundings, just so focused on ourselves. And so I want people to wake up and be aware and present in their lives and available to other people that they care about.
So you'd say this is more a lifestyle more than a vocation?
Yeah, this is, I guess I don't know the definition a vocation when you ask it in that.
Well, meaning it's. I've always thought that being involved in anything. First of all, I'm always 100% committed to what I'm learning.
Right.
But also, I don't want to be a talking head. I want to live what I'm.
Exactly. Yes, that's true. And so, yes, I don't think I can help other people to do what I'd like them to do if I'm not doing that myself. So anything that I put forth is because I've done some work on myself and worked through some of those issues on my own. And then I want to share that with others. So that's, for me, some of my archetypes that I know of are teacher, healer. And so when I learn something, or when I have personal healing, I want to share that with other people. I want other people to benefit from that. And so my journey has always been about healing myself, and then to help heal other people, like the wounded healer, right? I think that's an archetype there. And so that has been my experiences there. And there's always, just when I think, I'm doing pretty good, and I am doing pretty good, there's always more. And we always need to be continually improving ourselves and how we interact with the world.
Perfect. So did it begin? I mean, did you just wake up one day when you got to a certain age after your education and say, I want to be in health and wellness? And then if it was health and wellness, first of all, when did the fragrant molecules come into your equation?
Yeah, great question. So I've always wanted to help people, and in different ways. So in high school, for instance, I did a lot of volunteer work. I worked in hospice. I volunteered in a hospice for a couple of years as a teenager. That was because my grandmother had been through such a horrible dying experience without anything like hospice available to her. And a friend in high school, or junior high school, actually, she died of a brain cancer. And her mother started a hospice. It was next to my church. And I wanted to help other people to have an experience that was better than what my grandmother had, that could help put Jennifer's, story forward, like help, make her death make a difference. So I became part of hospice and volunteering there. I worked for 4 summers. Is it 4? 8 summers. I'm sorry, 8 summers for a week or two as a camp counselor for adults with disabilities. And so, I received actually a lot of awards, including the 848th point of light from President George Bush.
Wow.
So in the 90s. So there was, I did a lot of volunteer work. I always wanted to just give back. So it's been funny. Like, I don't think a lot of people have had their journeys documented as much as mine. Like I've had newspaper clippings. My dad would always buy an extra 5 copies of the paper whenever I was in the paper, but just, different things documented in my life of that journey of just helping others and wanting to make a difference. And, when I had those, people would interview me for articles like that, they would ask me, say you're so great for doing this volunteering, but the truth was it always helped me more than it helped the person I was helping, because I had this sense that I was doing something good, and it helped me to see where, just have this attitude of gratitude in my life. And I think especially working with adults with disabilities, and I also have worked with children with disabilities, that was especially important to me because when I was 5 days old, I had my first epileptic seizure. I had a grand mal seizure. And so I was on medication for until I was 16 or 17 years old, phenobarbital, for seizure control. And then I thankfully outgrew it. But I had a client when I was working for a local organization. That was my job for a few years, was working in group homes. And one of the gentlemen said that, same story as me. He had epilepsy, but he was born 20 years before me. And so instead of his parents taking him home after 5 days in the hospital, like I was, he was sent to an institution and grew up in an institution, and had that institutionalization, if you've ever heard that term, where, so even though mentally he was fine, he wasn't fine because of his experience through his childhood. And so he ended up in group homes his whole life, and then ended up in an independent apartment, but still needing the support of an organization, not being able to completely live on his own. And so I just have always been grateful and never taken for granted all the things that I've been given in my life and the opportunities that have been available to me. So I wanted to give back and help people that didn't have that chance to have that.
Thanks for sharing that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I have my grandfather had epilepsy, and
Mm-hmm.
a good friend of mine in Los Angeles had grand mal seizures.
Yeah.
And I also assisted. I volunteered in hospice.
Mm.
Some overlaps there. That I was not aware.
Yeah, that's great. Wow.
And I found out that even in the grand mal seizure, and I watched my friend have a seizure, and it's very disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think people realize that one step below a grand mal seizure is a migraine. Meaning that you think you get a migraine and it's nothing, right? I just got a migraine. Right. I took a pill, but your brain is just kind of overloaded, and if you're wired for other things, you could be in trouble. So my question to you is that, do you feel that there is a connection between your grand mal seizure somewhere inside you, where you wanted to have a life where not only did you heal yourself, but you also helped heal other people? And healing is a very loose word, but in terms of impacting someone's life, which is also healing.
Yeah, I think maybe that did have some impact on me, especially, I mean, like I said, just knowing that how grateful I was that my parents took me home, that there was medication that could control my seizures, so that I could live a normal life, really, was amazing, because there, 20, 30 years before that, the medication wouldn't have been available. The advice from the doctors was to send your child to an institution. Just completely different. So I'm grateful for the time I was born, to the parents I was born to, and the medication available so that I could have a normal life. And so I feel like that is always, like, I always want to pay forward, because, there are people in situations where they don't have the benefits that I had. Maybe not exactly, getting put in the institution as a child, but still, we all have to be aware of, just being grateful in our lives and giving back what we can and paying forward, to make sure other people have a good experience. I mean, when I was in about 10 or 11 years old, I broke my ankle, and I spent another 5 days in the hospital. And I was able to get up in get in a wheelchair and wheel around. And I remember I was in a children's section of the hospital, and some of the kids were there for way worse things than I was, up crying all night. And so I would just visit them, and just be there for other kids that had no one there to visit them. When you can. And so when a friend of mine, a couple of years later, she contracted French polio. I wanted to, actually, it's the other way around. I'm sorry. She had French polio. And when I broke my ankle, she came to visit me and became a friend for me, because I was very isolated for the summer without many people around. And so she came to visit me. And so when I see someone in the hospital that's alone there, I still like to go visit people, because when you're given that gift of somebody showing up for you, I think you got to pass that on and show up for other people in their lives.
Exactly. I mean, were you aware that when you got involved in health and wellness, because in my journey, my interest in health and wellness was very young. I was like 15 years old, not living in an environment that was not mentally supportive. And I always felt that the more I dive into that, the more chance I've got of unlearning what I'd learned, so I could heal that part of myself. Was that driven with the same reasons? Your deep dive into health and wellness early on?
I don't know exactly. I know that I had, I had a pretty, normal childhood, I think, a completely normally dysfunctional family. Just things weren't perfect. And so I had my own, like little demons and the way I saw the world and the way that I handled the world. And so have worked through a lot of that. But I think for me, it was helpful to help other people.
Right.
And so that was healing for me. I didn't even know that that was healing for me or how that worked. I just know that I felt better when I did that. And so I did those things. And so, yeah, early on, like I would say, I started volunteering at Camp Joy when I was 16. I think around that same age, I was doing other things. And always I had different ways of volunteering from when I was a young kid. So just that was ingrained in me early. I had some influences, like people that showed me the way that way. My dad was one of them. We used to visit the neighbor behind us who was also a member of our church, and he was a shut-in. He'd had a stroke and couldn't get out of bed. And so every couple of weeks we'd bring him flowers from the church and just sit with him and brighten his day. Things like that, just where it was, and I could see the power of that, of how that made a difference. And, I think I was about 10 years old too, when I realized that if I smiled at someone, that they would smile back and that it was contagious. And so I made it my mission to smile at everyone that I saw. And so I would walk down the hallway or walk in the grocery store and smile at people and see these smiles come back to me. And that made me feel good because I'd made a difference. And so it doesn't take much to really make a difference for another person, just a smile. And the thing I get complimented most on is my smile, which is, maybe the product of that decision when I was young to use my smile to pass on joy to people. And so, I mean, that's, and to this day, you can smile at someone. That's like the universal sign of just friendliness and caring and concern and acknowledgement that you see the other person. Someone feels seen and they feel, that they're seen, that they're a person, they're not invisible when you smile at them. And so I've always done that. And it has made a difference for people.
I think you're right. I think that aspect of giving, loving, listening is loving, kindness, where you're a service. I'm a teacher, so there's been a driving force behind that. And every time I would help somebody and every time I would be teaching, I was really helping. But it was the only time I felt free of my own personal suffering.
Right.
In my own brain, I felt disconnected. But when I was teaching or when I was helping, I forgot about those other things. And then, of course, the goal has been to be in that place all the time. So I don't have to, because that stuff is there. It's going to be there all the time. But I'm curious, when did the fragrant aspect of your work interject? And how old were you? Or was there some memory from the past that you had in terms of fragrance? And when was it that you said, I'm now going to go in a different kind of direction from my health and wellness, even though it's part of it?
Yeah. So I think scent has always been important to me. I'm a person that smells everything from when I was little. I mean, I smell everything. I have to feel things, like if I'm walking through a store, I touch the fabric of everything I pass by. I want to feel the fabric, and I want to smell things. So before I eat something, I smell it. I smell, clothing before I put it on, or I smell everything. I really have always done that. And my grandmother was a gardener. And she, even though I only saw her once or twice a year, they lived out of state. I think that was passed down to somehow. I recognize flowers and things. I don't even know how I know their names. I really have no idea because I'm not really a gardener. I'm a wannabe gardener. I would love to garden. I just don't take the time to do that. But I have this like inner knowing of plants and things that I can't really explain. So my grandmother was a gardener. At my house, we had what we called the stink garden, which was fragrant herbs and poppies. And we had, we grew a couple of vegetables, maybe cucumbers and sugar snap peas, but we called it my father named it the stink garden because of the fragrant things that were in the garden. We had sage and there were chives in there and I don't know what all, but it was a very fragrant, small garden at the end of our driveway. And so it's always had some impact. It's always been in the background for me, plants and also just scent in general. And then, it was not that long ago, really, that I became involved in aromatherapy. So around 2013, I think, I had, well, actually, let me think. 2005 or so, I met my friend Rachel, and she had a lot of products that she made that were aromatherapy products. She had sprays and tinctures and all kinds of things that she was creating, hundreds of products. And I just started learning from her, just learning what she was doing with them. I helped her sometimes make her labels, just like saw what, all that she was doing. And I became more and more interested for myself in some of those things. And then by 2013, when I was thinking of, boy, this is getting really personal, Michael, but I'm going to say this out loud. So when I was thinking of, like ending my marriage, I thought, well, I would like to, is website design the only thing I want to do? I wanted some backups to how I could really do things in the world. And at the same time, I became interested in aromatherapy. And then that led me to botanical medicine and homeopathy and Reiki and all the other things that I have training in. And so I had this goal of I'm going to get all this training before finalizing things, right? It didn't work out that way exactly, but that was my plan, was to have this, something that meant something to me. To learn. And so I just became really immersed in learning all aspects of plant medicine and energetic healing. And I just wanted to get more and more of that. And so during that, I'm sure I was healing myself, right? There was a lot of that, like there was a lot that needed to be healed in that point in my life. And so really just falling into learning about all the different aspects of plants and plant medicine, and then wanting to share that, because as I was learning, even before I founded aromatherapy school, I was interviewing aromatherapy companies and publishing those on my blog. I really just, as soon as I was learning things, I was sharing them, because that's who I am.
It seems like it's I mean, I can relate to this. It's a calling. When I first got involved in, I've been doing aromatic for 37 years, but when people ask me, are you a botanist? No. Chemist? No. What's your experience with plants? Are you into plant medicines? No. I felt a calling, and I think you said it. You had an intuitive aspect of you that was wired in, and you knew the names. And of course, you cannot go through the subject unless you learn the botanical names, the common names. You got to learn the chemistry, not because you have to be a chemical expert or chemistry expert, but it's part of the growing process. I have no history in my entire life in the north of England. I have no history with botanical medicine. Yeah. So I'm just really drawn by that aspect of being drawn intuitively. Yeah. And that's how you get here. And then, of course, when does it become a place where you go, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? I know what my moment was in that. When was it when you said, this is it?
Well, so I haven't given up other aspects of myself. I know from what I've heard from your story that as soon as you decided aromatherapy was it, that you're all in and that was everything, right? And that's what you continue to do every day. I have kept other aspects of myself still. I'm still doing website design, for instance. I don't know if I'll do that forever, but for right now, especially building AromaTrust and the Aroma Summit by AromaTrust. That's a lot of website technology aspects there. So I continue to do that. I had kind of walked away from aromatherapy for a little while because, I went through a lot of training in aromatherapy. I went through my basic certification, but then also many more courses and connecting with people all over the world in aromatherapy. And I love that. I love the community. But I started to see a lot of aroma drama, a lot of things that really didn't matter. And as far as what I wanted to do and the difference I wanted to make, and just a lot of repetition and topics that, in arguments that I saw happening online and things like that. And I really didn't want to be a part of that. So I started backing off and just going back to what I knew, which is website design, and doing that. And then aromatherapy was always in the background. But I even went as far as I could not ever use all the oils that I had. I had thousands of dollars worth of oils that I wasn't doing anything with. They were sitting in a refrigerator. So I gave those to someone who came to my house. She didn't come just to see me, but she was here from New York City. I took advantage of that. I gave her, a couple of giant bins full of essential oils and herbs and all the things that I wasn't using. And I gave them to her, but she sent them to Haiti where they could be better used. But my point, I guess, is I was just kind of done with it for a little while, like not completely done. And what I've learned from all the people that I've talked to is that you can't just leave aromatherapy. Like it will pull you back in. And so in 2022, I went through, I found this email that said they were looking for people for this pilot program to see if somebody non-technical, which I don't really, even though I do a lot of technical things, I'm not as techy as some people, that a non-technical person could create an online solution with using no code tools. And so I just put my hat in the ring. I thought I'll see what happens, and somehow got selected to be a part of this program. And there were 40 teams when we started out. I was one team. And I put that out there. And the idea was to have no idea what you want to do and come in and figure out who you want to serve. And then what is their biggest challenge? And then how can you meet that with an online solution? How can you solve that somehow online using no code tools? So the more I thought about it, aromatherapy kept coming back to the forefront. And once I got that idea in my head, I could not let it go. It just, I could have maybe gone another direction, but I decided aromatherapy was it. And then AromaTrust was born in that incubator in downtown Rochester, New York, and really has gone from there. And so it was really, putting myself out there, letting, this program helped me focus in on what it was that was important. And that's what came up. So even though I thought I had kind of walked away from aromatherapy, I really hadn't, because it was all still there and the connections were still there. And so when I, started talking to people and telling them what I was doing, there was a lot of support for it. And just, that's how the AromaTrust by Aroma Summit was born, through that, just wanting to bring together a community and start that community aspect even before AromaTrust is ready completely. And just following that and then seeing where it leads. And that's how we're sitting here together today.
Well, it's an interesting decision, because you created a platform. It's like some people write a book and then people read your book and they come to you. In this way, there's plenty of other summits going on all the time.
Right.
You told me that you only want to have people in there once. You don't want to have the same people repeating.
Oh, for speakers. Yeah.
And of course, you choose the people. They somewhat choose the topic, but at the same time, you're influencing the topic because you're part of it. Do you feel that you're filling in your educational gaps through your own summit?
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. I can get all the continuing education credits just by doing the summit, right? I don't have to take anything else throughout the year if I don't want to.
All these conversations with people where you get to ask questions. You're really excellent at bringing out something real about who you're talking to. And it's a beautiful description, as opposed to just I'm talking to people who are monetized, who are coming in to promote their products. That was never part of what I thought was happening with AromaTrust.
Yeah.
I came into it late. I didn't know it even existed for a couple of years. But I think it's an interesting way that you've rebuilt you're building your library, but also you're using that intuition, if I'm not mistaken, to guide your decision to do what you're doing based on your background in technology, also within your holistic health and your ability to give. It seems to me that all these things are infused so you can help people.
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly right, Michael. And as far as I feel like everything I've done, people say, well, is there anything you don't do? Like, why are you doing all these things that seem so different? Right. Like, I think before we hit the record button, we talked about, I was an editor of law books for a while. I do website design. And then aromatherapy and botanical medicine and homeopathy and Reiki. And how do these all fit together? They seem so different, but all of those things together are what has made AromaTrust and the Aroma Summit by AromaTrust. So all those experiences, I feel like, has led up to being able to create this. So even though and I've always just followed my heart, and I don't understand why I choose to do things or I want to learn a certain thing. I just know that when it comes into my head, I will, research it, learn about it, explore that. And it's what's enabled me to create what we're all here for right now.
And I thank you for that. And I think that we did discuss before that essential oils is not the end game.
Right.
It is a mechanism that weaves in and out of your subconscious and changes your chemistry and your botanical molecular structure and how you absorb and change and fire different cylinders and increase dopamine. But that is not the end game. It's what you do with it.
Right.
And it's clear to me that that's what you've done. So the next question I have for you is, what has the aromatics done for you personally, based on the fact that you already had a life of giving and loving and kindness, and also your health and wellness? What has essential oils done? Where are you now aromatically based on where you were before the aromatic equation?
Yeah. So aromatherapy for me is one tool in the toolbox, right? So years ago, I wrote an article called "I Love Your Aromatherapy, but I'm Seeing Other People." And I talked about, because, if you go see a surgeon, they're going to want to cut. If you see a psychiatrist, they're going to want to talk to you and give you a pill. If you see an aromatherapist, they're going to want to give you an oil for that, right? There's a very narrow view. When you see a practitioner and they have one thing that they do, that's what they're going to treat you. And I remember sitting through homeopathy school, and we would have clinic and people would come in for treatment. They would come in and tell us everything about themselves, and we'd find a remedy for them. And I always wanted to bring in, well, what if this aromatherapy thing could help, or this other thing could help? And Dr. Moore always focuses on, this is homeopathy school, this is homeopathy clinic. There may be other solutions, but we're focused on homeopathy. So we had to give a homeopathic solution. So there's all these different things in my toolbox, right? But what my real desire is that someone will want to heal themselves and be empowered of what, that have choices of how they do that. So aromatherapy is one of those things. And for myself, it's one of those things. I mostly use aromatherapy for like pimples on my face. I love, tea tree for that. I love a nice sleep blend. It's often something I use for sleep. I use your products that you created with Stefania for my face, for cleansing and moisturizing my face. So there are different aspects of aromatherapy that I use all the time. And then I always have a sniffy stick nearby. My favorite, the Sunshine Sniffy Stick that I created a couple of years ago. I use that all the time. I have that. Right now I have Angelica root sitting next to me. I always have something around me that's aromatherapy related, and it has evolved, and there are times when I use it more or use it less. I've used it certainly when I'm sick or when my son is sick. For a while, I was using it for him for growing pains, all kinds of different ways of using aromatherapy. Whereas I didn't have that in my toolbox before, right? So it's another tool in my toolbox, but it isn't always, it's not even the first thing I go to for many things. If I'm starting to feel a cold, yeah, maybe I could use aromatherapy, but it's not my first thing. Usually it's homeopathy.
Right.
I feel like that's a more subtle medicine. And then I go up and aromatherapy is kind of a big gun compared to some of the other things that I've studied. So I don't always bring that in first, but it's very effective. And especially for sleep, I love it. It really does help with that. So I have different ways that I use it, but it's one of the things. And I want, that's why with part of the Aroma Summit by AromaTrust, I bring in people that are using aromatherapy plus something else, or even just something else. And I want people to learn about that. So when I was taking botanical medicine and homeopathy with Dr. Les Moore, we always had a section every year on other modalities. So we learned about Ayurvedic medicine. We learned about chiropractic, osteopathy. We talked about hydrotherapy, all different aspects. And he had me teach 1 year on aromatherapy. So I did an hour with the class on aromatherapy and taught them that. So bringing in, it's important to understand what the other modalities are and giving people a choice of what they choose, what they're choosing to use to heal themselves. And so aromatherapy is a piece of that, but it's not the whole picture for me. But AromaTrust is that, obviously based on aromatherapy, but it also is inclusive of other modalities so that we can help each other to heal.
Well, thank you for that, because I think that really, I didn't know that. And I'm just reflecting on what you said. And I want to go back to the beginning where you said that you really wanted to wake people up, or you wanted to wake up.
Right. Yeah.
And the next thing you said was that you have this, you have this intuitive piece in you that knew about flowers and knew about plants. And then that's expanded upon. And I want to also support the fact that you don't need this. I mean, I've got 750 essential oils in my lab and almost 2,000 blends. Either I've got a lot of problems that I need to know, or I am really a botanist by definition. I'm interested in the shapes of the leaves, the colors, and so forth. But that's a whole different. It's not just the fragrance I'm interested in. I'm interested in the whole plant. When somebody said, "Where's this plant come? Where does this all come from?" I want to know what that plant looks like, what the color is, how it's distilled, and so forth. But it's a waking up process, and I think you're onto something. And maybe I'll make a statement, and you can agree or disagree, which is essential oils make everything you do better, and it makes your mind fire better. It makes your focus better, and it also, as you said, that the end game is how are you impacting other people without selling them something? Is your knowledge and your intuition now as developed where you can be more open, more loving, more kind, more healing? Because let's face it, I said this in one of my talks, I think, we become the blend. The blend that we're looking for is a blend within ourselves. Essential oils maybe help to create that. So I think, would you agree that that's kind of where the end goes? It's not about the essential oils per se, but how it impacts you to impact other people. Not to say you shouldn't have a business that's aromatically based, where you're filling a void, as I do. I mean, when other people are doing something, I go, thank God, Emily, I don't need to do an Aroma Summit. That's for you to do. That's not my expertise.
Right. Yeah, we all have a different piece of that big picture in the aromatherapy world, which I love. None of us could do it. If it was just you doing aromatherapy or just me doing the summit, that doesn't mean anything. But when we are all doing our thing that we're best at and that we love, it's a beautiful collage, a beautiful mosaic of all of us together. So something you said a minute ago was about, waking up and staying awake. And I just, in that moment, when you said that, realized that by, the fact that I woke up, right? I feel like I woke up and in my own life and looked around and said, is this what I want? And the answer was, not going to throw it all away. I love me, but there's some things here that don't work. And then how can I change that? And then wanting to stay awake. So I think what aromatherapy has done, and by being connected with others and being able to help others to do that, so that teacher healer, right? Or is it healer teacher? Because healing myself first, waking myself up first, and then so the best way to stay awake is by waking up others who can stay awake with you. I think there are times, and so I'm not saying I'm awake all the time. I'm not saying I don't go unconscious. A lot of my day, I'm driving down the road and I think, how did I get here? Obviously, there's moments and even days or weeks where I'm just on autopilot. But I don't want that to be a decade or a couple of decades ever again, right? That happened for way too long in my life where I feel like I was asleep at the wheel. And so the best way to stay awake is to have someone stay awake with you. Because when we have those unconscious moments, we can be a mirror for each other and we can reflect back, and we can, in a kind way, just gently remind somebody, hey, there's good stuff happening right here, right now. Let's be in this together instead of unconscious next to each other, right? So I think if we can do that for each other. So really, that waking up for me and wanting to stay awake. So all of this that I'm doing really is about me. It comes back to me, that same thing when someone says, well, aren't you great for volunteering? Well, but it helps me more than it helps the other person. The same is true here. I can have a better experience and keep myself awake if I help other people to do that for themselves. And then we can keep each other awake and aware and just present in our lives.
It's like a smelling salts. It's like
right.
It like really, or some essential oils do that. They wake you up from the
they do,
going back into the unconscious. And I was thinking to myself, when you were talking about, is it really about the essential oils? Or let's imagine that we don't have essential oils, all we have is herbs.
Right.
And we have 750 different herbs, and you pass them under your nose and you smell each one. Is there a difference? Not really, because except the dosage you'd be smelling would be less.
Yeah.
Now, let's imagine we take 10 of those herbs and then we put it into a salad. Yeah. Isn't that how we connect with the aroma with the food?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And see, as long as we're smelling, we're not really integrating ourselves into the salad. We are the salad also. We have to feed ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I told you late that my what I do in my life is different than yours, but we really are connected, and we have this overlap now. I think it's very clear, and I think this would be a great topic for a future summit about the idea of waking up and staying awake and using fragrance. Since the nose is in the center of our faces, obviously that must have something to do with fragrance, the waking up part.
Right. Yeah, I think it does. And I love the example you gave of smelling salts, because smelling salts requires another person to be present to administer, right? So somebody falls down, they pass out, and they're completely unaware of what's happened. And then somebody else is there with the smelling salts. I remember we used to have these at church, in the back of the church. If you were an usher at church, there was a spot where you could grab one quick if someone passed out in church. I never saw this happen, but I knew where they were in case that happened, right? But if somebody passes out, you bring that over and you put it under their nose so it wakes them up, right? But if there's not a person there with the smelling salts, I don't know. I'm like, I guess you wake up eventually, but it takes a little longer. And, I don't know the reason. Why do we need to wake up so quickly? But, if we take the analogy really far, but the thing is, that's a medicinal response, right? To put the smelling salts in front of somebody. And so, but it requires another person. Yeah,
it's a shock of something in extremes.
Right.
Like normally nature doesn't produce something like that, except mustard seed oil, which I smelled, which is basically don't smell that out
don't
of the
do
bottle.
that.
Because it'll basically do the same thing as smelling salts will.
Right.
That's
yeah.
an extreme example. And
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree that we need this constant connection to nature to always remind us of our destiny?
I think so. Like getting out into nature, connecting with the plants, using the oils, those are the things that keep us awake, right? So if we go unconscious and become disconnected from all of that, I think that connection happens when we really are in tune with nature. It's when we try to get away from nature and we go into our little box and shut everything out. We don't want bugs in. We don't want to let the temperature of whatever the air is, we want to regulate that. We want everything perfect in our little box in our house. And then become disconnected from ourselves, from nature, from what is really important. And so we need to be more open to being present and being in tune with those things, with each other, with other people. We can't live our lives by ourselves and isolated without a lot of neuroses that comes from that. So really just, I think that having that connection with other people, connection with nature, that's what keeps us awake. It's when we get away from those things that we really become unconscious, or we're really trying to, become disconnected from ourselves. There might be some aspect of ourselves that we don't like, so we run away from that. We don't like the people around us or what's around us, so we disconnect from that until we're completely asleep. And so really coming back to that, you asked the question in the beginning, who is Emily Carpenter? Really just asking that question, who am I? And who do I want to be? And am I that right now? What do I have to do to get there? And aromatherapy is a great way to stay connected to that. And then with each other. And so this aromatherapy community is a way for us to just constantly remind each other that there is a way to be present. And what more present thing can you experience than smelling something and taking in that scent and really feeling it fully enter your body and have that experience of what does it feel like? What does it smell like? And really being in that moment. It's hard to be asleep when your senses are activated that way. So yeah, you're right. It really does all connect back to each other.
So if you could see these, I like to see my life in stages. I've done 22. I'm 65, and if you include the time with my mother's belly, I'm 66 already. But 22 years I was in England. 22 years I was in holistic health and aromatherapy, and 22 years I've been fully integrated in other aspects of the equation, which is help people in many things. What is your, I don't know, I don't need to know your age, but what is your next phase? What is your next stage in your life? What does that look like if you were looking at it from where you are now, looking not to future trips, so to speak, but just to pop your head in and see, what does that look like for me? What do you think?
Interesting. Yeah. So, it's that connection still. I think I had some period in my life where I was feeling disconnected. So if I go back, if I look at stages of my life, there was, being a student, and then there was working in human services, and then there was the editorial piece, and then the website piece, like working in technology. And then right now it's the aromatherapy, the natural healing, and there's been some overlap in those things. But I see the future being this teacher, healer, and connector. Those things of really creating a space where people can feel like they're a part of something, they're part of a community, that they are connected with each other, that we all have this thing that we love and that we were putting out into the world. I want to make that space where there's kindness and connection and collaboration, and that we're creating the future we want consciously, rather than going along what we've always done. I want to create, really be intentional about where is the future of aromatherapy and doing that together.
Love it. Yeah, because I think without our eye on what's next, we can also go to sleep in our compartment, even though we're thinking of doing this. Because I constantly try to reinvent myself, only because I don't want to become stagnant. And it's not all about fragrance, but it is all about fragrance, but it's both. But there has to be, I would love to have that aspect where when I go to my church, somebody might say to me, could you help me with my headache? Because I'm stuck with this pharmaceutical. And my dream would be to integrate it where people don't understand. I mean, we're conduits after all. I think we both agree with that. This is your third summit.
Yeah.
There's a continuation and an evolving presence. What do you see as the next bridging point? Because you're obviously on a mission, and each one of these summits has in its own compartment. What do you feel is next for your summit?
Yeah. So the first summit was just to bring people together and see what happens, right? And that it was great. And so we did it again. A very similar type of summit. So the first summit we had, I think, 34, 35 speakers. The second one, 38. This one is 24. So why do we have less speakers? Shouldn't it get bigger and bigger every year? And when I thought about that, no, it doesn't need to get bigger and bigger. And the more speakers doesn't make it a better summit. What makes this summit separate from any other event are the connections that happen during the Aroma Summit by AromaTrust. So we come together to watch videos together, to watch interviews, pre-recorded interviews like this one. But we also then follow it up with live Q&As with the speaker, having those really connecting pieces where people feel like, someone they thought they could never have a conversation with, they get to ask a direct question and get an answer from that person, and then have a conversation as a group with those people. And then we're providing other interactions throughout the summit the last 2 years to do that. And those will continue this year. We're still going to do that because people love that. I love it. And it's just a unique piece of the summit is that we actually have face-to-face conversations with each other. But this year, what's going to be even more connecting are we'll have actual, smaller group conversations as well, so that people have an opportunity to get to know each other even more intimately. So there will be still those group discussions. And alongside that, we'll have sessions where we're asking important questions about just ourselves, connecting with ourselves, connecting with other people, thinking about what we want the future of aromatherapy to look like. And all these conversations will be guided and meaningful. And I think people are going to be surprised what comes out of it. So I'm really excited to have this new aspect to the summit that hasn't been there before, just in a deeper way that we can have connections and come away from the summit with new ideas, new friends, and just hope for what's to come.
I think it's beautiful because it's this whole interaction allows individuals to be part of the mix.
Mm-hmm.
And other people are seeing the same questions, perhaps, and people are talking. And of course, I've always seen the aromatherapy world as a physical world where we've got the science, we've got the emotional world, which is the trauma, we've got the mental and psychological, which is also part of a modern day condition due to overload and isolation. And then we've got the spiritual part, which has to do with some form of spirituality or some faith-based. And maybe by interacting with your audience the way you are, you will start to see a theme about what people want to see next that fills in the gaps, like you're filling in your gaps by doing the interviews, seriously, because you have to be present and awake. But maybe there's other people see this as a learning process so they can get to the end and reach a conclusion of where they would be best suited in their own lives using essential oils on a day-to-day basis. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I know that the summit inspires people, gives them ideas of what to try next, who to connect with. A lot of things have come out of it. A lot of collaborative efforts have come out of it. People have, ended up doing all kinds of projects together based on that they met at the summit or they reconnected at the summit. Really, I love just seeing what's going to come next for people. And I think just by having these opportunities to really have important conversations is like no other. And the fact that people can come from all over the world in one place. I think if people said, well, are you ever going to do this in person as an in-person event? And although I love in-person events, and I'm not saying I'll never do an in-person event, who knows, but there's no way that so many people could come together. The fact that, there's a free option for the summit to attend live, and not have to pay for travel expenses and all the things that come with in-person events. There really is no other way that we could have this experience than the way we do it. And I try to make it feel as much as like you're in person as possible, and have it still be an online event. And so those are the interactive pieces that I'm really excited about.
Well, Emily Carpenter, you want to give you recognition in your contribution to our aromatic world, because whenever you get more than one person in the room, which you've got many people in the room, and they keep coming back, it's because you're making a difference in people's lives. And just to quote you, where you want to help people connect, not only to other people, to themselves, and therefore you're part of the learning journey by providing this platform of knowledge. So it's been just delightful to talk to you.
Thanks, Michael. It's an honor to be able to create this space, and I hope that people enjoy it and really just go away inspired and taking action in their lives and saying, where am I asleep? Because all of us are sleeping in one aspect of our lives. So, you could be awake in one area, but completely unaware in another. So finding out what those blind spots are, and then maybe using this talk here as inspiration to start asking those questions, and then seeing where can I be more aware in my life? And then because I'm aware, what can I do next? And how can I share that with others?
Well said.